My healing was so intertwined with my physical body and my spiritual and my mental health. It was almost one and the same, and one would affect the other. If I was feeling sick, my mind would feel sick. And if I didn't feel good about myself, then my symptoms would get worse. And for my healing, I knew that I could try all the treatments in the whole world. None of them would work if my soul wasn't ready to be healed.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Lucid Living Podcast. I have a new guest today. She is a survivor of anxiety, POTS, and Lyme disease. She had it for over 10 years, suffering from chronic illness, and she was able to heal herself through basically spiritually. And what I want to um, go into is her story. So this is Kiki. She is known as Chronically Healed on Instagram, so make sure to check her out. And if you want to look into her story a little more deeper, make sure to check out her website at chronicallyhealed.com. And information will be left in the description. Okay. So Kiki, can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, well, pretty much very healthy and happy for like the first 15 years of my life. I didn't really have that much problems. And then when I turned 15, um, I just started feeling very dizzy and nauseous, and I kept going to the doctors, and they're, not very helpful. Um, about a year of feeling this, I finally got diagnosed with POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which basically meant whenever I was like standing or sitting up, my heart rate would beat really fast and my blood pressure would drop and I just feel faint all the time. And they put me on all these medications, but they didn't really help. Like the side effects just made me so much worse. Um, and so they said, well, maybe, if you're not responding to treatment, maybe you'll grow out of it in 3 to 5 years. But I didn't.
Okay.
I was still sick. Yeah, so that's kind of like how I how I started out with this chronic illness journey.
Yeah. And I was watching your video and I saw that you use alternative medicine. So can you alternative medicine and and also some spirituality in there. Can you explain, what led you to taking the alternative route and how that helped you out?
Hmm. Yeah, so after like all those medications weren't helping, I kind of like gave up on medication because I just had such a bad experience with it. And again, with just doctors saying, "Oh, you'll grow out of it in 3 to 5 years," and then I wasn't.
Mhm.
And then that's when I was diagnosed with Lyme disease, and I'm thinking, maybe this is the cause of the POTS, is the Lyme disease,
Right.
like a root cause. And I was put on antibiotics for 7 months, and that made me so much worse. It did not help at all. And again, there's like, well, there's no other treatments for Lyme disease. Um, and then one day I just happened to I was a part of this Facebook group for people with POTS,
Mhm.
and someone was talking about a POTS treatment center in Dallas. And I just happened to be going to Dallas because my brother was going out to school there. So I was like, I'll go check it out. And it was biofeedback therapy, where they'd kind of hook you up and you'd control your breathing to try to control your autonomic nervous system. Um, and that, it did make me feel a little better. And that really gave me hope. I thought, wow, maybe I actually can, overcome this. And through that, all those times, the chronic illness made me very socially isolated. I didn't really have any friends, and it was a very hard time for me. And so I leaned on like my relationship with God and my faith, and that really gave me hope to keep moving forward. And trying these alternative treatments um, did give me hope that, I'll just keep trying treatments until some work. And some of the ones that really helped were IV therapy, where they did vitamin drips and this thing called glutathione push. And that really helped my body, my own immune system to kind of fight off the Lyme disease. And then there was a point where I was very malnourished because I couldn't eat food at all. I had so much stomach pain and digestion issues. And at that point, like I thought I was gonna die because I just couldn't eat food. I was so malnourished. And I'd pray to God every night that I would wake up in the morning. And, by the grace of God, I did. And I started trying medical marijuana. And I never thought that would help because that can increase your heart rate and decrease your blood pressure, which wouldn't be good for POTS. But somehow it, enabled me to eat food, and I was able to eat full meals, got all those nutrients in there to help my own immune system, and it also like uh, calmed down my autonomic nervous system, which POTS is like an autonomic dysfunction. So calming that down, I think also really helped. And that was kind of like the treatment that, like the cherry on top, like all my symptoms went away and I was just completely healed. I was on it for a couple of years. I would take it before meals and before bedtime, but I haven't taken it in, I don't know how long. It's been quite a while, and I don't use marijuana anymore, and I don't use any treatments, and I haven't had any symptoms.
So you've
I'm
been
completely healed.
completely healed, right? Completely
Yep.
cured.
Mhm.
Okay, that's awesome, and I'm curious, because I have myself, I've experienced, I met a lot of people with chronic illness, and, one of the struggles that people talk about often is just how isolating and lonely
Mhm.
it can be to, be in that situation. So can you tell us a little bit about, maybe why do you think it is so lonely and how you felt going through that?
Well, it's really hard to get out of the house, when you're feeling that sick, you don't really go out. And when I was, before I got sick, I was very social. I had tons of friends at school. I loved going to school. But then after I got sick and I stopped going to school, I just stopped having those friends. Like, they stopped calling, stopped hanging out. And of course, nobody really understood or related to that. And so it's very socially isolating. Um, and I was a part of a few of these Facebook groups
Mhm.
for other people with POTS, but I'm kind of not all of those groups are very good though because they're very negative. I would kind of go on
Oh,
there and
okay.
make me just feel bad about myself. So it's
Mm.
kind of hard to like find a good community of chronic illness, people with chronic illnesses.
Yeah. Is
Mhm.
is that what is that what your, work is kind of geared towards, providing a platform, a community for people to feel, both be positive and also get the resources that they need, for chronic illness?
Yeah. So what I try to do is I want to, well, one, raise awareness for chronic
Mhm,
illness, but I don't want to keep reminding people, oh, you're sick, you're sick, you're sick.
mhm.
So I also want to keep that positivity and hope, and it's not all doom and gloom, and try to give them resources to get through those hard times and those dark times.
And I know it is hard to be positive, and you did mention that you found a light when you went to Texas and you
Mhm.
got some relief through the biofeedback therapy. Um, what do you think so to somebody who's listening right now and they are feeling lonely, what would you suggest that will help them both to feel a lot more positive and also get a little closer to not feeling so alone?
For the loneliness, I don't know, because for me that was the hardest part out
Mhm.
of all of it, out of more than like the physical suffering was the loneliness of it. Um, I really didn't make any friends until I started feeling better and I was able to go out a little bit. But I do recommend, there are some groups out there, online communities, and like my Instagram page where it is a positive influence and you can connect with others.
Mm.
Um, and as for staying positive, one thing I did was I would magnify the good. And because, I'm always surrounded by this, suffering and illness and negativity. but there's always one like sliver of hope, like a tiny little light. And you can find that and just magnify it.
Mm.
So for example, I would go outside or even just look out a window if I couldn't make it outside, and I'd see a little flower, and I'd kind of just focus and meditate all my energy on that flower. And I think about, wow, like how beautiful is this flower? It's so vibrant and colorful, and I just think about how it grows, and I think about how my ability to see that and have that understanding of beauty and just kind of focus on that and magnify that instead of like focusing on everything around me. That really helped me stay positive.
That's actually something I like to talk about a lot, magnifying the positive, almost as if completely you go tunnel vision, but into the positive. And, if you think about it, for the people who may not even have chronic illness, but they are suffering even, just mentally, just, like anxiety, I'm guessing that is labeled, would that count as chronic illness?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah, so people I feel like oftentimes what I see is that people are very good at magnifying things, but in the negative sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and we have the skill, but we just gotta learn to use it in the other form.
Mhm.
How did you what so for me, I often think repetition is important and also consciousness in the sense that I am consciously choosing to, uh, choose where I draw my awareness. So, what are some of the things that helped you to really reinforce that practice or that skill?
I guess there's a saying like, you can something like you can it's really hard to like keep moving forward and look for that, but it's even harder to stay where you're at. And there would be some days where I just felt so overwhelmed and self-pity, and I just felt so bad for myself. And I just saw what that was doing to my soul. Like it was just not good for me. And like I had a I think the motivation for like looking for those positive things was just to get away from that feeling of doom and that just kind of bad feeling for my soul.
Do you feel like it was like an almost instant uh reaction or an instant, noticeable change when you did do those things? Because I feel like a lot of people find it very hard to magnify things, and especially in the positive, because they are so taken back from the negative. Do you think did you feel an instant relief, or was it something also that took time to, develop, that feeling of like, "Okay, I can actually feel good if I choose to do so?"
It definitely was not instant. It was definitely a process that took a lot of practice, and it took years um to kind of get to that place.
Okay.
Mhm.
And so I'm guessing here, I'm curious about your spirituality because I'm guessing that's how it was part of the reason why you developed that practice, or it at least aided in that. So you mentioned meditation. I'm not sure if literal meditation in the sense of like, sitting down, closing your eyes, but you did mention meditation and you did mention spirituality and God. So how did that play into, just the ability to find the light and magnify that positivity for you?
Um yeah, so like my relationship with God had such an influence over that because you know I at first I kind of related like my life to God. Like if my life was going good, that meant God was good, or if my life was going bad, that meant God was bad. But I had to kind of differentiate the two. Like, my life isn't an indicator of God's goodness.
Mhm.
And even if I was feeling bad, even if I was not feeling good, I could still lean on God's goodness. Like God's goodness and joy and peace was always there, even when I didn't feel it. And I could always tap into that, um, no matter what. And no, hmm. how do I describe this? Like it like my illness was not an indicator of my faith. So I could still have a lot of people think, oh well, you're sick because you're not praying enough, you're not, you don't have enough faith or something like that. But I kind of had to learn that wasn't the truth. And I could still have a very deep, intimate relationship with God, even while I was suffering and even when I was sick. And I don't know how I would have gotten through that time without leaning on God's goodness, because I didn't really have any. I really needed his goodness and joy to help me get me through that time.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I feel like this is something very big, and what I hear is you had to differentiate between circumstance and your faith, right? So your circumstance does not determine your faith.
Hmm.
And I feel like the topics around God is actually, an interesting one because a lot of people are, they're not spiritual, or they think they're not, or they choose to not be so or label themselves that way. And so oftentimes that is due to this relationship that they created around God, or how they define God in faith. And it led to them basically directly correlating, or even thinking that God was the cause of all their circumstances.
Hmm.
And and so how did what was the realization there for you? How did you realize, or was it a decision, or was it a realization where you recognize that God's goodness is something that you can choose to tap into?
I don't remember like a specific point in my journey when I kind of realized that. I think it just kind of happened over time as I was uh, just going through the journey.
Okay. And to those, would there be anything that is that something that just came through kind of just the experience, just the long time, just the 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 term of your illness, and it just happened as time passed? Was that basically, you were trying to figure out a way to feel better, and, you kind of landed upon that, or it kind of led to you recognizing that there was actually some sense of truth in that?
Yeah, yeah, just like you were saying, just kind of over time and through the journey, I always say like there's no easy way out. There's no get out of suffering free card. The only way to get out of suffering is just to go through it. And I would also pray a lot, and my prayer life, as much as I talk about positivity, a lot of it is lamenting. And I do think lamenting is different from negativity, because lamenting, you're just saying it like it is. It does
Mhm.
suck. You are suffering. And I'd read the Bible a lot, and in the Psalms, a lot of the prayers in the Psalms are prayers of lament, of I can't take this anymore, like help me, like God, please, this, I can't handle this, things like that. And it was very like freeing just to say that
Mhm.
and have God listen to my prayers and listen to my cries. I think it's so important to express those feelings of emotions and actually feel them and not try to hide them or get rid of them, just to go through it, go through the suffering. Mhm.
That's actually pretty powerful because so lamenting, and this is something that I'm learning right now as you speak. So when I hear, lamenting, to me, I like to translate it into a few different words. Acceptance, this idea of really accepting reality as it is, not so much as if, in a negative or in a positive, but as yin and yang, as black and white, like this is what it is. And anything that we attach to that is our decision. But the reality is that, for example, there is this illness that I have, or that I am suffering, and I do need help, and so that's another thing, that the idea of surrender, That's the next thing that I think about. Surrendering to the circumstance, not so much as you say in the negative sense, because that's playing the victim, but
Mhm.
surrendering in the sense that you're taking responsibility for the circumstance that you have now. Because you know, I think that the power that lies within that is that, when you are in the negative, you stay a victim, but when you are surrendering, you are becoming like the hero in the story,
Mhm.
where you are choosing to say, okay, I give up all the resistance of, saying I can't do this, or saying, um or denying reality, 'cause that's what a
Mhm.
lot of people do, and that's I'm gonna go next into that right now because there's a big part that you just said right now, but and so instead of denying reality, by surrendering, you take everything in your hands, and you actually look at it for what it is, and you say, "Okay, I know what I can do, and I know what I can't do, but I also know that I'm willing to learn, or I'm willing to do something about this." And the decision of, like, I am willing to do something about this is very hard for a lot of people to get into, because as you said, the idea of, um I'm just gonna I feel like a lot of people just push things away, or they choose to not really take ownership, or yeah, so instead of they try to go around the situation instead of going through it. And so that's where surrender plays. But then the next part, um that I think that I translated into, the idea of lamenting, is vulnerability.
Mhm.
And vulnerability is crazy. Just how I mean, I think vulnerability is really the ability to be okay with your emotions, to be okay with who you are and what you're going through, and more importantly, to be able to express that to God, or to your friends, or to your family, and or to strangers, or whatever. And I think that aspect of life is really essential to the healing process, because I myself, I'm a big psychology guy, so I would break this down kind of into in terms of shadow work, doing the shadow work, which is basically looking at the emotions that you like to push away, and then really stop denying, like, you're going to stop denying them, and you decide to look at them for what they are, and really say, okay, so this is really how I feel, this is really what's going on in my body, instead of pushing it to the corner, and trying to move through things, um as and move around things. You're not going to move through things unless you're completely your full self.
Mhm.
And in order to get there, you really have to be vulnerable with yourself. So I think that, that idea of lamenting, is that like a Christian, like a term? Is that something, or is that like your own thing that you came upon?
Oh, it's definitely there's a whole book in the Bible called Lamentations. It's
Okay.
yeah, it's a very biblical concept. And I
Okay.
think a lot of people don't really they don't really talk about it, even though it's a pretty big part
Right.
of yeah, the Bible story. Mhm.
Yeah, so I grew up Catholic myself, and I never really read the Bible. And that's the issue that I have with my own, religion. I never really took it seriously, because I wasn't really, I don't think I really made a connection between the Bible and the lessons and the wisdom, and
Mhm.
also God. But listening to you, it makes me want to read the Bible, because I know that, like you just said, nobody talks about it.
Mhm.
Nobody talks about this aspect of healing, because this is really healing that we're talking about.
Mhm.
And, what else do you feel like, the Bible, or God, or, your religion, what are other parts of there, that really helped you in your healing process?
Well, kind of like the things you were saying, like acceptance and willingness. Um, there's a part in the Bible when Jesus knows he's about to be hung on the cross, and he's like so overwhelmed. It said he was like dripping drops of blood. He was in so much anguish, and he was praying, and he asked his friends to pray for him, and he ended up praying like, God, this is the cup you've given me, like I'll drink it. He was so willing to accept what he was given in life. And so I kind of did the same. Like again, like it wasn't my fault that I had a chronic illness. Like I didn't choose to have it, but it was my responsibility. And so I took the cup and I drank it and I was like, I'm going to live a purposeful and joyful life, even if I'm sick the rest of my life. And I think that was one of the most important lessons I learned in my chronic illness journey, because a lot of people, they don't experience healing in this lifetime, but it's so important to know that even when you're sick or even when you're disabled, you are still so important. You still have purpose and you can still live a joyful life. And, that's something that, God has taught me kind of over the years.
That's actually that's really beautiful because I think of it. So I like to kind of I like to think of things a little differently where your body is a separate self, right? And your body is suffering, and to disregard the illness and to say I don't want this, it's kind of like rejecting your body also.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that you wouldn't want to treat people like that, right? So why would you treat yourself like that? And people, I don't think people there's something that needs to be put into perspective because if we were to look at I know, for example, because the reason I say that is because there's a lot of people that are suffering from chronic illness or even mental illness, and the label itself is like a death sentence, or it's a complete, um, you know, it's really ostracizing, so people have this label, and because it is attached to their body or it is attached to their identity, they automatically, they don't like the label, of course, because of all of the judgment and all of the ideas that are behind it. And in doing that, they completely push away their bodies because of the label that they've given it. And I I feel like the this needs to be talked about more in terms of taking responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, taking care of children or taking care of another human being, or taking care of your pets, for example. I feel like there's a lot of people that treat others a lot better and bring more awareness to others than themselves often. So, what I like to say is that responsibility brings power, right? The whole Peter Parker, with greater power comes greater responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it's the same thing flipped backwards, vice versa. With greater responsibility comes greater power because the more you take ownership of, the more you are capable of working with. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, you mentioned responsibility, so how do you see responsibility playing out in both in healing and also just life in general?
Yeah, like you were saying, like responsibility and power. And for me, I could see that healing does require a lot of responsibility. And if I would healed, I would have a lot more responsibilities. And so I was kind of resistant to healing because I didn't want those responsibilities. Same thing with identity. Like I identified so much with my illness. Like I didn't know who I was. If I was healed, like what would I even do? And so like my subconscious was like resistant to healing because if I was healed, I would lose a part of myself. And so healing required finding that new identity and accepting those new responsibilities as well.
Okay. I like that what you just said about that's actually pretty interesting where you said that there was a an identity that you would release if you healed. And um you said that that was at a subconscious level, or was
Yeah,
that okay?
I didn't realize it at the time.
Yeah.
hmm
Okay. And what kind of made you did you realize that after the fact, or was that something that, you were once faced with and you were like, "Okay, I have to really I just have to decide."
It's probably like again another long process that I went through. I don't
Mhm.
remember a specific time, but I do throughout the journey, like there are these things that you just have to leave behind because
Mhm.
you're not going to be able to move forward towards your healing if you can't bring them with him. Like there's no room for all these, bitterness and, identity. You have to leave them behind at some point, in order to move forward.
So one thing that I want to dive into is the identity part. So in removing your identity, did you ever think about the possibilities? Where did you ever question uh well, it sounds like you kind of did. You looked into the positive, but in the sense of planning for creating a new life or creating a new identity, um, was that something that, that started to happen as a byproduct of healing, or were you also kind of wanting to really when you were sitting there and suffering, were you really envisioning yourself, okay, so how would it look like if I was healed? What kind of person would I be for people and for myself? Or did or how, I'm curious about how that went. Whether did you imagine yourself being healed? And when did that start happening?
Well, not at
If you
first.
did.
I didn't realize it. I Thinking about healing, I just thought I wouldn't know, again, like I wouldn't know who I am. I would have lost my identity of a sick person.
Mhm.
Um, because I just lived in that so much. And then again, I didn't know what I would do. Like I'd lived this life of illness for so long, and I was very disabled from it a lot of times. Like my mom had to wash my hair for me, or I couldn't drive, things like that. And I was scared of healing because then I would have to learn these things like driving. And I know that it sounds like silly now, but that was a real fear I had, just because like I was an adult, basically, and I didn't know how to like cook for myself. And I was really embarrassed about that. And healing would require acknowledging that I didn't know how to do those things and I had to learn them as well. So, but as I did get better, I had to create a new identity for myself, and I had to, identify with that hope, identify with the light, identify with healing. And now it's like now that I am healed, like I have this, just desire to help other people who have chronic illnesses. And I do have I went to school. I went to Grand Canyon University, in their theology. I have my bachelor's and master's in, biblical theology and ministry. So I do want to, start a ministry eventually for
Mhm.
people with chronic illnesses.
Okay, that's awesome. How did you said identify with the hope, with hope, healing, and light. And so what do you think, cuz you said you were scared. So do you think there was some level of low self-esteem there, or was it
Mhm.
just an inability to match life, or to feel like you are even connected with life?
Yeah, I think both. I had very, very low self-esteem because I would compare myself to healthy people, and I thought very like low of myself. Like wow, I can't even do these normal things. Like I'm weird. I'm not normal.
Yeah.
And um like kind of what else you were saying, and I would have to it took a lot of humility. I would say like healing involves a lot of humility to like address the things that you're embarrassed about, or face your fears, things like that.
Okay.
Mm.
So so for those who don't know, because the word healing, it kind of is thrown out, it's kind of said a lot now. We're bringing a little bit more awareness into the, kind of just the global consciousness, um, because the we used to think healing was just like a physical thing, and now we're definitely talking more in terms of spirituality and just emotions and mental, also just healing the mind. So what would your definition of healing be?
My definition. Well, for me, my healing was so intertwined with my physical body and my spiritual and my mental health. It was, you know, almost one and the same, and one would affect the other. If I was feeling sick, my mind would feel sick. And if I didn't feel good about myself, then my symptoms would get worse. And for my healing, I knew that I could try all the treatments in the whole world. None of them would work if my soul wasn't ready to be healed. They had to be both. I both had to heal my heart, heal my soul, and heal my body with physical treatments. It was kind of like both or all of it combined. All
Yeah.
the, yeah.
Yeah. It's holistic, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It was they all connect. And so you said you want to do you want to create a, create a ministry, build a ministry for
Mm-hmm.
people with chronic illness. And so that's something that happened as a byproduct. Is there any other areas in your life where you felt like the lessons you where you've applied these lessons of healing and you've seen, some positive outcomes?
Um, I guess when I was sick, I was very socially isolated and I developed social anxiety because of that.
Mhm.
And so I kind of applied the same thing, like you just got to go through it. The only way to like overcome that was to put myself in situations and face my fears of socializing and like I had to learn like each little step by step, like say, hi, how are you? And then if,
Right.
you know, each step by step. And once I was healed, I wanted to get a job in sales because I thought, oh, I could develop a lot of social skills through that. So I applied for a job at a furniture store,
Right.
um, to and which is weird because I would have never thought in a million years like I would be a salesperson at a standing on my feet all day as
Yeah.
well. And so I did, I would push myself to go every, you know, even if I was like nervous to go to work and like, oh, I'm not very good at sales, but I just kept going and trusted that I would keep learning along the way.
Right. That's cool. Yeah.
Mhm.
That's where you met my sister, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so, I mean, I met you in person. I feel like, it's, you are a little quiet, but I feel like you have the energy of, like, a good sense of self.
Hmm.
And yeah, like, that's something that I could say, and I want people to know. I think that I myself, I am a very introverted guy. So, the do you know Myers-Briggs?
Uh,
Myers-Briggs personality
I'm
test?
real familiar with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I classify as an INTJ, which is kind of like the very like, just a very introverted, reserved, cautious personality. And for a long time I let that define me. And I think that, the if I did, I wouldn't be where I was at right now. And we didn't really get into too much of the mental stuff, but I feel like, we kind of did touch upon it. Um, but mentally, I feel like, being a social person, that itself is a healing process too. Like getting over all of the ideas that you carry about yourself, all the
Hmm.
ideas that one would, usually think during a social interaction. And I think that that's something that, people don't really talk about too often because we often think that the introverted person is introverted and will forever be so. And then we put the label of quiet and shy. And and I think that in itself is something that we can choose to do also, to choose to play into. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah. I think that like, quiet and shy, I don't think they're personality traits. I think they're just emotions and
Mhm.
everyone feels them at some point.
Yeah,
Um, for me, like I feel like when I was a kid, I was very extroverted but then when I got sick, I became more introverted. Once I got healed, I felt a lot more extroverted, but now after I've been healed for a few more years, I feel more introverted. It's kind of weird. Like
yeah.
I don't,
You're the
yeah, one way or another.
you're the ambivert.
Yeah.
The ambivert, it's a person that's balanced on both. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What would you say to people who are socially anxious? Because I don't think we did get talk about that too much, but to people who suffer, because there's a lot of people who suffer from anxiety,
Yeah.
so what would you say to them, or what do you think what would you say to them?
I think like the only thing that helped me was just to, you know, go through it and put myself in, situations and just accept like, oh, if I had an embarrassing moment, just, accept it and just kind of move forward with that. And that took so many years. And I think that was even harder than overcoming a chronic illness was overcoming the social anxiety because I had to like put myself on the front lines over and over and over. And,
Yeah.
something I couldn't do. I was like having like so much anxiety and like, no, I can't do this. I have to go home. And then I would just try again the next week and just, just keep going, keep moving forward.
Yeah. That's kind of what I did. I would just go up to people in college and just try to spark up conversations, even though I was, like, kind of shaking, like, most of the time. But, so you wouldn't say take on a sales job if you have social anxiety?
Oh, well, I didn't have social anxiety any after
Yeah,
when the
after
job,
that.
but I
Yeah, when
just
you
want
got
to like
that.
keep going. Like I didn't want to
Yeah,
like okay, like I don't have social anxiety anymore. I'm good. Like no, like I want to keep going. I want to
yeah,
keep developing my social
yeah.
skills. Mhm.
Okay, okay, and that's where the ministry plays into too, huh? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Do you have any other things you wanna add to the podcast? I think we're pretty set. I really like how it went. Um, are there any other things you wanna mention, or anything else that you thought was important?
Just the keep moving forward.
Mhm,
I would say, you know, the only way to ever get to where you want to go is to keep moving forward. If you want if you want to go somewhere, like you can't get there just by staying put. You gotta keep moving forward. And sometimes that looks like sometimes the most you can do is just stay in bed all day and feel sick.
mhm.
You just get through the day and then you just keep moving forward every single day. That's
Yeah,
would be my advice to people with
yeah.
chronic illnesses.
So if people want to know more about what you do, can you let them know what your website is for, and what your social media is for, who would be mostly interested in it? What's the mission that you're on? Actually, let's go with that. What is your mission? What is the thing that brings you purpose into your life?
To raise awareness, advocacy, and God's hope for people with chronic illnesses.
Okay. I
Mhm.
like it. That's the punchline, huh?
Yep. Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, I love it. Yeah. We're on the same mission. I want to raise the awareness too. I want people to understand themselves at a deeper level. And hopefully you can help them out with that too. I know people will be in good hands if anybody who wants to learn more about chronic illness or whatever. Make sure to check out Kiki, okay? And I think we're set. So thank you guys for joining on the podcast. We'll see you guys on the next one. And remember, stay lucid. Peace out.